The Canadian dollar is the best performing currency in 2021. Experts credit the loonie's success to an increase in prices for crops, energy, and metals. Export receipts are also at a record high and are expected to increase, while the cost of lumber is also on a rise, with shipments nearly doubling in the first quarter. However, some economists warn that this may contribute to more stress for key sectors that may be left out of the commodities division. So what does a stronger Canadian dollar mean for Canada's economy overall? Well, joining us now is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Ltd. Welcome back to Forum Daily, Brendan.
Thank you, Nima.
So what is contributing to the successful growth of the Canadian dollar?
Well, as you mentioned in your intro, it's this commodity, that commodity, the other commodity, but really there's only one commodity, and that's oil. Canada is the only normal country in the world whose currency is really a petrocurrency. After us, perhaps comes Norway and then Mexico, and then the rabbit hole goes very deep after that. Energy prices, which were very weak during the depths of the pandemic, have come roaring back, both due to supply constraints and increasing demand as the world opens up again, particularly in the United States. And we are, as I say, the only real country in the world that has a currency that trades, and that currency is so dependent on the price of oil. So we got a price of energy going up, the loonie is taking wing.
So I guess the big question is this good news for Canada's economy overall?
Well, if you were traveling, it'd be great. I mean, the pound and the US dollar and the euro were much less expensive so your trip to France or Florida would be cheaper. Except, of course, no one's going to France or Florida. I think it's even illegal to go to Bob Cajun. So it's not as helpful to the retail person, the individual who would normally take advantage of that. It is somewhat helpful to exporters, of course, because the strong commodity prices have been helpful. But again, if you're exporting in US dollars and your costs are in Canadian dollars, if your labor costs, then that isn't very helpful. If it's offset by higher commodity prices, great. But I think, as you alluded to in your introduction, if what you make is not commodities, but finished products or services, your costs are in US dollars, you're exporting, so your costs are in Canadian dollars, you're exporting in US dollars or some other currency, it's not as helpful.
So what kind of sectors do you think are going to be affected negatively by this increase in the dollar's value?
Well, you would think intuitively that a strong Canadian dollar means a strong Canada. And yes, it is helpful, but really, again, if your costs are in Canadian dollars and that Canadian dollar is strong, it means your costs have gone up from low 70s to now low 80s, 83 cents, I think is where it is at present. So you're seeing everything from the film industry potentially impacted, to technology, to even the commodity sectors, because I mentioned earlier, but at least they have an offset. But when the Canadian dollar got up to more than par, more than 100 cents on the US dollar, you saw in Toronto, we felt this particularly, the film sector almost entirely shut down because it just became too expensive to make movies in Canada. But ultimately, we like seeing the Royal York Hotel in the back of a movie shot and pretending we're somewhere in Sweden or wherever the movie is supposed to be shot, Manhattan, and it's just not. So I think a lot of sectors have the potential to be affected by this.
So what kind of economic disparities would this present for policymakers that are trying to bring Canada out of this pandemic without leaving anyone behind?
Well, I think this pandemic has left a lot of people behind. The disparity between rich and poor, how they've got treatment, how they've been exposed to the virus. One person commented online that we've learned, if nothing else, how to keep rich people safe during a pandemic. So it's a problem. Like, it's a bigger picture problem more than just the dollar. And even now, you're not seeing people that are affluent coming down with cases of COVID, certainly not fatal cases of COVID. Sorry, I'm on a hobby horse. Talking about the dollar, I think that it'll be difficult to get people back to work, to hire people. It'll push more employers toward technological solutions, which require fewer people to work on them. George Jetson, in the old 60s sitcom, his one job was to push a red button to make the factory start. That's not quite where we're at, but it's where we're going to, and a high Canadian dollar accelerates that. So it's going to be difficult for people to find jobs coming out of the pandemic as employers look to technological solutions.